I want to open with a little clip here. We're in our second week of our series, Living the Yes of Jesus. We're going to be talking about Jesus' vision of the kingdom. And so I have Brian open us with the next clip if we could here.
A reading from the Holy Gospel of Mark. This is what John preached to the people. There is one coming later who is greater than I. I am not good enough to kneel down and untie his sandals. I baptize you with water, but the one who is coming will baptize you with Holy Spirit. At that time, Jesus came from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to the place where John was. John baptized Jesus in the Jordan River. When Jesus was coming out of the water, he saw heaven open. The Holy Spirit came down like him like a dove. A voice came out of heaven and said, "You are my own Son, and I love you. I am very pleased with you." This is the Gospel of the Lord.
Sometimes the scene is actually from the movie Miracle Maker, claymation of Jesus, and I just kind of like that English accent. Mark is the oldest of our Gospels. It was probably most likely written first, and we could go into that, but it's a long story. What's interesting about Mark is it's much more earthy than the others. Like, Jesus will go to heal people, and it takes him a couple times to get it right. There's just things that sound much more real that later on writers kind of cover up because they're like, oh, we don't want to make Jesus look bad. Mark starts out with saying, the good news of Jesus Christ, the message begins here. He says, following to the letter, the scroll of the prophet Isaiah says, watch closely. I'm sending my preacher ahead of you. He'll make the road smooth for you. Thunder in the desert. Prepare for God's arrival. Make the road smooth and straight. So John the Baptizer appeared in the wild, preaching the baptism of life change that leads to forgiveness of sins. The people thronged to him from Judea and Jerusalem, and as they confessed their sins, were baptized by him in the Jordan River into a changed life. John wore a camel hair habit tied at the waist with a leather belt. He ate locusts and wild field honey. And as he preached, he said, the real action comes next. The star in this drama, to whom I'm a mere stagehand, will change your life. I am baptizing you here in the river, turning your old life in for a kingdom life. His baptism, a holy baptism by the Holy Spirit, will change you from the inside out. I want to pause there for just a second. Up to this time, when John appears in the wilderness, this is the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, really end about 400 years before this, give or take. The story's going to end there. Some might have been written a little later. And most of the writings that kind of happen at the end of that really have this sense that, this feeling like that God is not really close and intimate. Like God had, you have Moses where God kind of appears directly. But you have more like stories like Esther. And if you've ever read the story of Esther, you know that the book of Esther doesn't even use the name of God once. I don't know if you know that. The closest it comes to speaking about God is when Esther's stepfather, our uncle Mordecai, says to her, who knows that maybe you came into the world for this time. In a sense that maybe God sent you, but it doesn't even say God. Maybe so there's a sense that that God is more distant. So there's much more talk of the cunning of people. Or actually, this reminded me of the class that Bridget had taught a few weeks back with a group of folks on angels, and realizing that people out there, a lot of them who are not connected with the church at all, they're hungering for something more. They're looking for it in like signs, things that are happening, or stories of angels. But God seems distant. And so there was that sense that God was distant. So we're talking about one of these things that are kind of this place between us and God. But John is saying now, we've had this time where God seems distant. But God is coming. Something's going to be happening. And at this time, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee, which is in the north, and he was baptized by John in the Jordan. And the moment he came up out of the water, he saw the sky split open, and God's Spirit, looking like a dove, come down on him. Now this is interesting. When we watched the scene, did you hear what the reader was saying? It says, in that version, it said, the heavens were opened. I remember one of my professors in college who was talking about this and said, was translated for a long time, the heavens were open, like this is a door. It opens a door, It says, in the Greek, it says, literally they were torn apart. All right? God tore them apart. And the Spirit comes down and he says, now this is in the form of a dove. He says, really, if you read it, it's not what it's saying. Have you ever heard a dove fly? Right? Think about, you've seen scenes where pigeons, have you walked through a group of pigeons and they take off? It's very similar. What does that sound like when their wings go? Yeah, it's just, it's really loud. In fact, it can be kind of scary, like when they all go at once, you like jump, right? You know what I'm talking about? No. Yeah, that was it. Right. So saying the heavens are ripped apart, and there's this sound that's just kind of overwhelming, and the Spirit comes down, and you hear this voice that says, "You are my Son, chosen and marked by my love, pride of my life." And the voice said, "Beloved." Now this is very interesting. So the voice comes down. God breaks in and says, "You are beloved. You belong to me. You're the pride of my life." And then at once, Mark loves this, immediately, at once, right away, the same Spirit pushed Jesus out into the wild. And for 40 wilderness days and nights, he was tested by Satan. Wild animals were his companions, and angels took care of him. Do you ever notice that? Like, these wonderful things happen. God lets you know that you are loved, and then what happens? It's like the roof blows off, it kind of cases. It's like God says, "You know what? You are loved, and I want you to let you know that because the rough things are coming. So I'm really with you. I really love you." So Jesus goes through this time, and he comes out, and John is arrested. After John was arrested, Jesus went to Galilee, preaching the message of God. Time's up. God's kingdom is here. Change your life and believe the message. So this is interesting. Mark, the oldest gospel, when it starts with Jesus coming to John. He's baptized. He's told that he's loved. He's tested. And when he comes out of this whole thing, what's the first thing he does? He does it. He goes out telling people, God's kingdom is coming. It's time to go a different way. Now, it's interesting if you read further, and I want to do that, but I just basically share that if you read further in Mark, right after this, Jesus goes immediately and he's healing people. He's going to the synagogue, he casts out demons. The sun goes down, which is the end of the Sabbath day, and people come from all over. So it's dark, and they're just flocking to him. Well into the night, he's healing people and casting out demons, and then he gets up even before the sun's up. So Jesus must not have slept much. And he goes to a mountain to pray. And the disciples wake up and like, where the heck is he? They come in to find him. They say, look, you got to get down there. All the people are here. They want to see you. And Jesus says, no. He says, I need to go on because other people need to hear this message of God's kingdom that's breaking in. Right? So in Mark, in a sense, Jesus is out there showing this God's kingdom that breaks in, that brings healing, that undoes evil. Right? Now in the Gospel of Luke, it's interesting because in Luke, when Jesus comes out of this, this is what happens. We click on it.
Reading from the prophets. The prophet Isaiah. Who's our reader?
It's myself. Today, Rabbi.
The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to give good tidings to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, to give sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord.
Amen.
Today, in your hearing, the scriptures
All right. Scriptures have been fulfilled. All right. I don't know why we had problems there. Sorry about that. I'm going to go ahead and click on the next thing. When we read the Gospel from Mark, today, by the way, I don't know if you know this, the church calendar today is the baptism of Jesus Sunday. You knew that. Today we remember the baptism of Jesus. So So we had the story of the baptism of Jesus. When it starts, it says, John comes, and he's coming. Who said he was going to come? Do you remember? The prophet Isaiah told you that he was going to be coming to let you know about this one who was coming to bring God's kingdom in. Right? Now Jesus, when he gets up for the first time in public to talk about his ministry, who does he read from? Isaiah. He reads from the prophet Isaiah. And what does the prophet Isaiah say is going to be happening? The blind will see, the lame will walk, the dead will be raised, lepers will be cleansed, and this is the year of God's favor. One of the best ways to talk about it, and Isaiah really lifts this up a lot, is talks about the reign of the Messiah, when God's Messiah comes and everything is set right in the world, when everyone is healed, when things are done. And if you look at Jesus, in the stories of Jesus, what we often miss is that this is central to Jesus. And you see it throughout Isaiah.